warm welcome to user interface design. I am Lokesh MR. We have already started the module 5. This is the second class where we are going to discuss about something called testing steps, usability and its importance, and also we are going to discuss about the scope of testing as well as the prototypes today's. Okay, what are the different types of prototypes? How do we create a user interface prototypes for the testing purpose? Previous class we have discussed about how the design of the interface needs to be checked. Okay, design of interface needs to be tested. So perform a designing of an interfaces, first we need to analyze the windows, how the windows is being organized and how the windows information has been placed in a logical order. That needs to be checked, that we have discussed in the previous classes. Before going for the testing process, we need to understand and analyze the area of testing and the informations of the testing, how it is been arranged and what are the components are available. Okay, that is first thing. The main purpose, the next we are in today's class, we are going to discuss about something called testing steps. Okay, testing steps. This is very much important. So we need to follow the testing steps in an ordered fashion. Okay, we should not skip the individual things, and we need to follow one by one itself. So one above the another. So why? Because when we are performing any operations in the user interfaces design, we need to start with the purpose as well as the scope of testing. Okay, the first one is we need to identify scope as well as purpose. Okay, this is major important because each interfaces will be having a different scopes as well as different purpose. So depends upon the scope as well as the purpose, we need to plan for the designs. Once we are identifying the space of the windows as well as the arranging of informations of the windows of a screen which we want to going to test, we have been discussed in the previous class. Today's class we need to identify the steps that we need to identify a different scopes, depends upon the scopes as well as the test purpose. The second step we need to follow to understand the importance of testing, because simply if you are going to test, okay, which is not being used, okay, commonly the interfaces can be easily identified by viewing itself. So if you are going on planning for the test, it is waste of time. So we need to understand the importance of testing, that plays the major role. So important of testing needs to be understood properly, that is the second step. And the third steps we need to follow is developing a prototypes. Okay, so any operations which we are doing it, so directly we are not doing the testing of an interfaces. Through the prototype itself we are going to do the testing operations. So next, after understanding, after developing the prototypes, we need to plan for right kind of test plans. Okay, so this right kind of test plans. Okay, because without planning we can't perform it. So for example, even for after analyzing what is the size of the windows and what are the components of the windows, for each components of the windows various testing plan we need to provide. And when we are performing various test plans, we also needs to identify the relevant data. Okay, for which relevant data we need to test it. Okay, for that purpose we need to design the next step, we need to design the proper relevant data. We need to test the process with the proper relevant data. Okay, so for example if we are testing the radio buttons, So we need to test whether the radio button is selecting any one among it. So we should not select all the content, and also we need to identify when the icon radio button is highlighted, whether it is been highlighted or not. And also whenever we are performing a testing, different kinds of testing with respect to the plan and relevant data, we need to identify the testing operations with the selected users. Okay, selected users. We are doing the testing with respect to the usability test also. We need to identify the users participations, who are the person who are going to use the prototypes, what is their knowledge needs to be available. Okay, and we need to provide a proper testing facilities for the people who are who are participating in the testing operations. Okay, so testing facilities needs to be provided. Facilities in the sense that the prototypes with the relevant informations, and we need to give a proper training for the person who are using it, and we need to get a feedback from it. And also we need to collect the testing, we need to conduct the test through some proper locations and the interfaces and the purpose, as well as we need to collect those informations, and we need to collect the informations about the testing, how he has been tested and all. So collecting the informations needs to be done in a logical fashion, so that he should not we can use for those collection features for analyzing purpose, So we need to analyze the data after collecting the informations, and then after analyzing we need to get the feedback from the technical person of the informations, and then we need to develop the if any modification is required for the prototypes, prototypes which is been already designed, that needs to be incorporated, and then we need to go for retesting the process with the proper modifications, and then we need to apply for once again system testing. If the modification is not required, then we need to go for a system testing. Okay, in system testing means it is the final testing which we have been find out from the prototypes with respect to the system testings, and then we need to go for the working modules. Like that, directly we are not going to the working systems. We started with identifying the scope of the testing as well as the purpose, and then we identify the importance, whether the testing is required for those purpose or not, and then we are identifying the different kinds of testing plans for each identified prototypes. So, and then we identify the different kinds of testing prototypes with respect to the testing relevant data, and we select we do the testing operations with the selected users, because we have to be known that the people who are using these participations, whether he is interested in the prototype testing or not. So for that purpose we need to use the proper selected testers for with respect to the relevant data, and we need to provide appropriate facilities for the users who sit in it, and we need to give a training if it want is, and we need to get the proper feedback from him, okay, for getting the understanding of prototypes, and then that is how actually the conductions will be done. And we need to collect the data with respect to logical fashions, and those data needs to be analyzed, which is been given by the users. This is been given by the users, and if any modification required, we need to modify with respect to the prototypes, and then the further process needs to be followed. So once it is been finalized, so then we need to go for the system testing once again. this is the second stage of testing our prototypes. Till here it is the first stage. After finalizing the system testing, we will find some bugs that will be modified and identified. So till here it is something like a usability test. From here it is a computer test, and then we are deploying from the working prototypes. Even the working prototypes also some defaults will be there. So that will be modified by taking the opinion from the user as well as the computer faults. So next we need to design all these operations, testing operations, with respect to the usability test itself. Usability test means we need to bridge a gap. Okay, we need to bridge a gap between the users, okay, who are interacting with the prototypes as well as the developers. So and through the user's perspective itself, we need to design our interfaces. Okay, for that purpose, mainly we need to concentrate on the usability test. Usability test. This is the second parameters we need to consider when we are going for the testing. So testing needs to be done with the usability test. The main purpose of this usability test is to bridge a communication between the developers as well as the users. Okay, bridge a communication between the developers as well as the users. So the main purpose is for the bridge communications between the developer as well as the users. This is main objective. The second objective is to while we are developing a communication between the developer as well as the users, developers is learning the users goals. Developers is learning the users goal, and also developers also learning the perceptions of the users. Okay, perceptions of the users, and also he is been learning the goals as well as the perception of the users through questioning him. Okay, so how do you feel that by using it and all. From these he is identifying the problems. What is the problem in using those interfaces and all. So this is with respect to the usability test. So usability test is even though it is been done with respect to the users, so it is a communications between the developers to understand the user's goal. The developers will understand the user goals, perceptions, questions, problems, like that. So similarly, and also it is used for evaluating purpose, and also it is used for evaluation purpose. Evaluation in the sense that we are checking whether the users are more comfortable in using the users properly or not. So from this itself we can identify the business is being done it properly. So even it is an evaluation process, so it is used for validating the designers. Okay, so whether the design which is being done, taken care by the people, okay, who are being designed with the proper decisions, whether it is being appropriate or not will be checked by using a validating the products. Okay, so by this we can identify more problems. Okay, we can identify if any problems occurs by the users and all like that. So next we are identify the importance of usability test. So importance, why it is most important of usability test. So the first important of usability test is for making a communications between the developers as well as the users. Whenever we are making a communications of it between the developer as well as the users, we are developing a different modules. Okay, we are developing a different modules. In some cases, some of the module will be used and in for the particular users, and in some cases another module will be get. Okay, so depends upon highest acceptable users will be developed. Okay, so initially if we are not interacting with the usability test, only one module will be done and it will be finalized. If you go for a usability test, then we can we can get a different modules. And also if the developer who has been developed their product may feel that it is more accurate, okay, and the whatever he has done, it is will be final. But if you go for the usability test, we can identify the developer's mistakes. We can identify the developer's mistakes. So by taking the help from the users. Sometimes the users may also be making a mistakes, but we need to take an average user's opinion for finalizing that. Okay, so we will get a different opinion from the users, and we can identify it. By this we can use a predictable usability of appearance. Okay, we can predict, okay, which one is the best one, whether the developer is correct or the user is correct, like that. By taking a opinion from the users, different opinion from the users, we can easily predict who is the correct, like that. And also when we are designing an interfaces, if we are using a usability test, we can design the interfaces along with some standards. So whether that standards, the standards which is being developed by the developers, standard which is being developed by the users is proper or not, that can be analyzed, and we can develop some guidelines. Okay, so and these guidelines may be followed by the next previous persons. Sometimes we are developing a prototypes. Initially we develop a prototype through the guidelines itself. These guidelines may be a proper or not, that needs to be checked with the usability test all the time when we are interacting with the people. So we will get a appropriate feedback from the users if we are use a usability test. And if any problem occurs when we are using the product, okay, with respect to the usability test, that needs to be identified then and there itself, and we can fix the problems when they are facing it. So if you do this, we can perform a computation. We can we can develop an interfaces in a competitive world. Okay, so the main objective is to develop our product in a competitive world, right? So for that purpose, we develop a product with respect to the usability test and its importance. Usability, if you do the usability test, we can develop a different modules, and we can, if developers mistakes can be identified early, and even the users may also be giving a wrong informations, that will be identified by the users opinions, and we can get a predictions from the developers as well as the users perspectives. And the developers are following the standards when they are developing the usability test, that needs to be that will be identified whether he is followed or not. If in some cases, even though the developer is following the standards, that may not be satisfied by the users, so that needs to be identified, and it needs to be kept as a guidelines for the future developers. And every time we will get a feedback from the people with respect to the development of any process, and if the problem they are facing, that needs to be checked. All these operations will be done with respect to the computations of the user interfaces. So next, let us understand the scope of the testing. What is the scope of the testing? When we are understanding the scope of the testing, so we need to check, okay, scope of testing. This is the third thing we need to follow. When we are understanding the scope of the testing is being done for early identification of problems, okay, in the beginning itself. So in early stages, early stages itself earliest stages itself we can identify the problems and we can fix and we can give the solutions for the developers for if any problem is occurs. Okay, we can give a solutions for the developers. Okay, before itself if you go for testing, usually the testing will be done through the prototype itself before going for the development. That is the main important scope. So the second thing is we can identify the tasks. Earlier we will be fixed tasks. So that task may be a developer's task, that may not be suit for the user's tasks. So users task can be identified and also not only users tasks, we will also getting a different components. Okay, we can arise the component. Initially we may took a minimized components with respect to the standardizations. If you are using a testing features, we can identify few more components in it. So with respect to that, we can develop a prototype. The scope of the prototypes can be done. Okay, thank you so much.